Welcome back to a quieter world. Tonight, we'll explore Yellowstone National Park, following the slow circulation of heat and water as it rises from deep underground and reshapes the surface in steady, observable ways. If you find these long, calm science documentaries useful, you can like the video and subscribe for more. If you choose to leave a comment about where you are listening from, it is always interesting to see how far these stories travel. Yellowstone National Park occupies a high volcanic plateau spread across parts of Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho, and much of its character comes from elevation rather than latitude. At over 2,000 meters above sea level, in many areas, air temperatures shift quickly with weather and time of day, shaping how sound carries and how heat is felt. The park feels expansive because it is, but that openness is broken into basins, forests, rivers, and ridgelines that each hold sound and movement differently. A step from dense lodgepole pine forest into an open geyser basin can feel like walking from a carpeted room into a tiled one, where echoes and air movement suddenly change. Much of Yellowstone sits on ancient volcanic deposits rather than solid bedrock exposed at the surface. These layers were laid down by eruptions and ashfalls over millions of years, creating a ground that is lighter, more fractured, and more permeable than typical mountain terrain. That fractured ground matters because it allows water to move easily. Rain and snowmelt do not simply run off the surface, but sink downward through cracks and porous layers, quietly feeding systems that remain hidden most of the time. Water enters Yellowstone steadily throughout the year, arriving as snow in winter and rain in warmer months. Snowpack acts like a seasonal savings account, storing water until spring and releasing it slowly as temperatures rise. Rivers, such as the Yellowstone and Madison, begin as cold, fast-moving mountain streams, but they are shaped early by underground heat and mineral inputs. Even where surface water appears ordinary, chemistry and temperature often carry a subtle geothermal signature. Forests dominate much of the park, especially stands of lodgepole pine that thrive in thin soils and cold winters. These forests dampen wind and absorb sound, creating long stretches of quiet, broken only by water movement or distant thermal activity. Open basins feel very different because vegetation thins and ground surfaces harden. Sound travels farther, steam becomes visible, and the ground itself begins to signal that something unusual is happening below. In these areas, the earth releases energy directly to the surface. Heat escapes not as a single dramatic event, but as countless small transfers happening all the time. To understand why Yellowstone behaves this way, it helps to think of the park not as scenery, but as a system. Everything visible at the surface is connected to processes operating far below, whether or not they can be seen. Deep beneath the park lies a region of unusually hot rock associated with a long-lived volcanic system. This heat source does not erupt frequently, but it remains warm enough to influence everything above it. Heat stored in rock moves upward slowly, passing energy from one layer to the next. The movement is gradual, more like warmth spreading through a thick wall than fire racing upward. That heat alone would not shape the landscape without water. Water acts as the transport system, carrying energy upward, much more efficiently than rock can on its own. Rain and snowmelt seep downward through fractures and porous layers, absorbing heat as they go. Once warmed, that water becomes buoyant and begins to rise. This rise sets up a continuous loop, where cooler water sinks and warmer water rises. The motion resembles a slow conveyor belt, moving heat upward without pumps or machinery. Depth controls how this system behaves, because pressure increases with every meter underground. Under enough pressure, water can remain liquid, even at temperatures that would normally cause boiling. In Yellowstone, groundwater often reaches these extreme temperatures while staying liquid. It remains stable until it rises closer to the surface and pressure drops. When that balance changes, water can flash into steam or escape gradually, depending on its pathway. Narrow passages trap pressure, while open channels release it smoothly. This difference explains why some surface features erupt, while others flow quietly. The shape of the underground plumbing matters as much as the amount of heat involved. Geysers form where water is trapped long enough to heat and pressurize before release. Hot springs form where water can move freely, carrying heat upward without storing pressure. Steam vents appear where water supply is limited, allowing heat to escape mainly as gas. Each feature represents a different way the same system releases energy. The ground above these systems often feels warm, even when air temperatures are low. Heat conducts upward through thin soil and mineral crusts, sometimes melting snow from below. Those crusts form as hot water dissolves minerals deep underground and deposits them at the surface. Over time, pale layers of hardened silica build up, recording countless cycles of flow and cooling. Because these crusts contain tiny pores, they behave like sponges rather than solid stone. Water and steam continue to move through them, even after they harden. Sound offers another clue to what is happening below. A steady hiss suggests continuous flow, while popping or splashing hints at pressure building and releasing in confined spaces. Smell also carries information. Sulfur-bearing gases create sharp scents that appear suddenly and fade quickly, marking where fractures reach the surface. In the hottest waters, life is limited to microorganisms adapted to extreme temperatures. Thermus aquaticus is one such organism, later becoming important to modern genetics. As water cools downstream, different microbial communities appear in narrow bands. Each group occupies a temperature range, like items arranged on pantry shelves. Water leaving hot springs often joins streams, influencing flow and temperature beyond the basin. Even small geothermal inputs can delay freezing and stabilize winter flow. Across the park, heat distribution remains uneven because the source sits closer to the surface in some areas than others. This unevenness creates clusters of activity rather than uniform behavior. Mineral buildup slowly narrows underground passages, forcing water to adjust its routes. The system responds quietly, redirecting flow without dramatic change. Daily cooling and seasonal snowmelt reinforce circulation, keeping water moving and heat rising. These rhythms repeat continuously, linking deep processes to surface experience. Together, these connections allow Yellowstone to remain active without constant disruption. Heat rises, water circulates, and the surface responds in steady, observable ways. Moving across a Yellowstone geyser basin feels different from moving through forest, because the ground itself becomes part of the experience. Sound carries farther, warmth rises from below, and even still air feels active rather than empty. The reason for this difference lies just beneath the surface, where underground circulation meets open terrain. Without dense vegetation or deep soil to buffer it, heat escapes more directly, and the landscape responds immediately. Geyser basins tend to spread across flatter ground, and that flatness plays a larger role than it first appears. Level terrain allows underground spaces to fill evenly, rather than draining away before pressure can build. This filling process works much like water settling into a shallow tray instead of a tilted pan. When water can spread and stay, it gains time to heat and store energy. A geyser depends on that stored energy. Water must remain trapped long enough to become hot and pressurized before release becomes possible. One way to picture this is like a pressure cooker with a narrow valve. Heat builds quietly inside until the system reaches a point where release follows a predictable path. Hot springs behave differently because their underground pathways remain open. Water rises continuously, carrying heat upward without stopping to store pressure. In mechanical terms, a hot spring functions more like an open drain than a sealed container. Energy moves steadily rather than accumulating behind a barrier. Steam vents appear where water supply is limited, leaving heat with little mass to carry it. In this case, energy escapes primarily as gas rather than liquid. This is similar to how a dry radiator transfers warmth without circulating fluid. Heat moves, but very little material travels with it. Small differences underground can lead to dramatic differences at the surface. A channel only slightly narrower or deeper can shift a feature from calm to eruptive. This sensitivity is why two pools close together may behave nothing alike. The underground layout matters more than proximity. Temperature becomes the main organizing force once water reaches the surface. Each degree sets boundaries on which chemical reactions can proceed safely. As hot water flows away from its source, it cools gradually and releases dissolved gases. The process resembles opening a carbonated bottle slowly, where pressure drops and gas escapes in stages rather than all at once. These chemical changes affect acidity and mineral balance downstream. New conditions emerge step by step as water continues to cool. The vivid colors surrounding many hot springs come from microbial mats rather than the water itself. Each color marks a narrow temperature window where specific microorganisms can function. These microbial layers arrange themselves like shelves in a pantry. Each shelf holds only what fits its conditions, and even small temperature shifts can rearrange the entire system. The stability of these color bands reflects how slowly temperature changes across a basin. As long as heat input remains steady, biological layers stay anchored in place. The hardened crust around many springs appears solid, but forms with countless tiny pores. Those pores behave like ventilation channels, allowing water and steam to move through hardened material. Because of this porosity, heat does not spread evenly. It concentrates along hidden pathways, making some patches warm while nearby ground remains cool. Sound offers another way to understand what is happening underground. A steady hiss suggests continuous flow, while splashing or popping indicates pressure building and releasing in confined spaces. In open basins, sound travels easily because there is little to absorb vibration. The effect is similar to sound moving across open water, where low frequencies carry far. Water chemistry also shapes how boiling sounds. Mineral-rich water behaves more like thick soup than plain water, bubbling more smoothly and releasing energy less violently. Vegetation patterns around thermal areas reflect these physical limits. Heat and unusual soil chemistry restrict root depth, favoring grasses and low shrubs over trees. Where soil does develop, it often contains elevated mineral concentrations. These conditions reward endurance rather than speed, allowing tolerant plants to persist. During winter, Thermal areas reveal themselves through snow patterns. Snow melts first above warm ground, tracing underground pathways like outlines drawn by heat. These melt lines function as natural maps. They allow scientists to infer circulation routes without drilling or disturbing the surface. Water leaving hot springs continues to influence the system long after cooling. It joins streams, linking geothermal heat to larger river networks. Warm inflows can delay ice formation and stabilize winter flow. Even small temperature changes matter because they alter how sediment settles and moves. Over time, steady flow reshapes stream beds. This reshaping resembles slow sanding, where repeated gentle motion gradually redirects channels. Evaporation adds another quiet effect. As water evaporates from shallow pools, minerals concentrate and later settle farther downstream. Those minerals accumulate slowly. Over centuries, they form terraces much like scale buildup inside pipes, recording former flow paths. Thermal features cluster because heat rises unevenly from depth. Magma sits closer to the surface in some regions, feeding groups of basins rather than spreading activity evenly. As mineral deposits narrow underground passages, resistance increases. Water responds by seeking alternative routes, similar to traffic diverting around a blocked lane. This rerouting happens quietly and continuously. Individual features shift, but the broader system remains active. Daily cooling reinforces circulation. Cooler surface water sinks at night, encouraging warmer water below to rise. Seasonal snowmelt adds another timing layer. Spring recharge sends cold water deep underground, where it absorbs heat and sustains activity through dry months. Not all features respond the same way to added water. Some geysers become more active, while others slow as pressure relationships adjust. These differences reflect underground geometry rather than surface appearance. Small structural variations lead to very different outcomes. Because direct observation underground is limited, scientists rely on surface measurements. Temperature, flow rate, and chemistry act like dashboard gauges for deeper processes. Long-term monitoring reveals stability beneath constant change. The system adjusts continuously without losing balance. Taken together, surface features act as readable expressions of deeper motion. Heat rises, water circulates, and the landscape responds in steady, understandable ways. Another subtle influence on surface behavior comes from how heat spreads sideways as well as upward. When hot rock lies close to the surface, warmth can migrate laterally through fractures, widening active zones beyond a single vent. This sideways movement helps explain why entire basins feel warm rather than just isolated points. The system behaves less like a single chimney and more like a heated floor, where warmth spreads beneath the surface before emerging. Water pressure changes slowly as it moves through these lateral pathways. That gradual shift allows features to adjust rather than fail suddenly, maintaining stability over long periods. One way to picture this is like pressure equalizing across connected rooms rather than building behind one closed door. Energy redistributes instead of concentrating dangerously. The thickness of surface deposits also affects how heat escapes. Thicker sinter layers act as partial insulation, slowing heat loss and keeping underground water hotter for longer. This insulation effect resembles adding layers to a roof. Heat still escapes, but more gradually, which changes how often and how intensely features activate. Wind introduces another quiet influence at the surface. Moving air strips heat from exposed water and ground, altering evaporation rates and cooling patterns. In practical terms, wind acts like a fan pointed at a warm surface. Heat leaves faster, which can subtly change boiling behavior without altering the heat source below. Air temperature plays a similar role. Cooler air increases heat loss, while warmer air allows surface water to retain energy longer. These differences help explain why some features behave differently in early morning compared to midday. The heat supply stays constant, but the surface conditions shift. Humidity also matters because moist air slows evaporation. When evaporation slows, water cools less quickly, extending the time it stays hot. This is similar to how damp laundry dries more slowly on a humid day. The surrounding air limits how much energy can leave the system. Over long timescales, these small surface influences accumulate. Repeated patterns of wind, temperature, and humidity gradually shape mineral deposition and channel evolution. Season after season, the system adjusts its pathways in response. Nothing needs to change quickly for the landscape to change meaningfully. Even footpaths and boardwalks influence nearby features by altering airflow and shading. These changes are minor, but they demonstrate how sensitive surface expression can be. Despite that sensitivity, the system remains resilient. Heat and water continue circulating, even as surface conditions fluctuate. This resilience comes from redundancy underground. Multiple pathways allow circulation to continue, even if one route becomes blocked. A useful analogy here is a braided river. When one channel fills with sediment, water shifts to another without stopping the flow. Because of this redundancy, Yellowstone's geothermal system rarely fails outright. Instead, it reorganizes continuously, adjusting to constraints as they arise. That constant adjustment gives the surface its living quality. Features change subtly, but the overall rhythm remains steady. Standing within a basin, these processes become readable through warmth, sound, and movement. Each sensation carries information about what is happening below. Taken together, the basin acts as an open interface between deep earth processes and the surface world. Heat, water, air, and time meet here in ways that can be sensed without seeing underground. Water leaving Yellowstone's geothermal basins does not stop being part of the system once it cools. It continues outward through named rivers and lakes that quietly carry heat and chemistry across the park. Many of these waters begin high along the Absaroka and Gallatin ranges, where snowmelt feeds narrow headwater streams. Cold, fast-moving water enters the park, carrying oxygen and sediment shaped by steep terrain. The Yellowstone River begins near Yount's Peak and flows northward into Yellowstone Lake, forming one of the longest undammed river systems in the continental United States. Before reaching the lake, it passes through areas influenced by geothermal runoff that subtly modify temperature and chemistry. Even small temperature changes matter once water enters Yellowstone Lake. Because the lake holds water for long periods, geothermal inputs spread and persist rather than flushing away quickly. Yellowstone Lake sits at over 2,000 meters elevation and covers more than 300 square kilometers. Beneath its surface lie active hydrothermal vents that release heat directly into the water column. This underwater heat creates localized zones where water remains slightly warmer year-round. These zones influence circulation patterns, especially during winter when surface waters cool dramatically. Lake water organizes itself into layers based on temperature and density. Warmer water floats above cooler water, creating a vertical structure that resists mixing. This layering behaves like stacked blankets. Each layer stays mostly in place unless wind or cooling disrupts the arrangement. Geothermal heat thins these layers locally, allowing mixing in areas where it would otherwise be limited. That mixing redistributes dissolved gases and nutrients through the lake. Water leaving Yellowstone Lake continues north as the Yellowstone River, flowing through Hayden Valley and later carving the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. As it travels, geothermal influence gradually fades, but does not vanish immediately. The fading effect resembles warmth spreading from a heated stone placed in cold water. Energy disperses outward until it blends with surrounding conditions. The Firehole River provides one of the clearest examples of direct geothermal influence. It flows through the Upper Geyser Basin and Midway Geyser Basin, receiving warm runoff from features like Grand Prismatic Spring. Because of this input, the Firehole River often stays warmer than surrounding streams. In winter, sections can remain ice-free, even during extended cold periods. Downstream, the Firehole River joins the Gibbon River at Madison Junction to form the Madison River. This convergence blends geothermal influence with colder mountain water. The Madison River carries this mixed signal westward beyond the park boundary. By the time it reaches Montana valleys, direct geothermal warmth has mostly dissipated, but sediment and channel structure still reflect its origin. The Gibbon River itself flows from Gibbon Falls and Norris Geyser Basin, picking up heat and minerals along the way. Its steep gradient keeps water moving quickly, limiting how long geothermal effects persist. The Lamar River system in the northeastern part of the park behaves differently. It drains a colder, less geothermal region, providing a contrast that helps scientists understand heat influence by comparison. When rivers like the Lamar meet warmer systems downstream, temperature differences drive mixing patterns. Warmer water rises slightly, while colder water sinks, blending over distance. These mixing zones act like transition spaces. Physical and chemical conditions adjust gradually rather than abruptly. Minerals carried from hot springs settle out as water cools. Over time, this deposition alters stream beds by smoothing rough surfaces. This accumulation resembles fine dust settling in a quiet room. Each layer is thin, but together they change texture and flow behavior. Streams influenced by geothermal input often show stable channel shapes. Consistent temperature and flow reduce extreme freeze-thaw cycles that fracture banks. Stable channels behave like well-worn paths. Water follows predictable routes instead of cutting new ones each season. Heat also affects gas exchange. Warmer water holds less dissolved oxygen, influencing chemical reactions downstream. As geothermal water mixes with colder tributaries, oxygen levels recover gradually. The system balances itself over distance. Wind and air temperature interact continuously with river surfaces. Moving airstrips heat from exposed water, increasing evaporation and cooling. This cooling changes density slightly. Cooler water sinks more readily, influencing vertical mixing. These processes occur everywhere along rivers and lakes. Small effects accumulate across long distances. The combined system of the Yellowstone River, Firehole River, Gibbon River, Madison River, and Yellowstone Lake demonstrates how geothermal energy spreads beyond its source. Heat enters locally, but moves regionally. One way to think about this network is as a relay. Energy is handed from deep rock to water, from basin to river, from river to lake, and onward. Each segment passes influence forward without needing to store it indefinitely. The system stays flexible rather than rigid. Because water keeps moving, Yellowstone avoids buildup and stagnation. Adjustment happens through flow. Rivers respond by shifting channels slowly. Lakes respond by redistributing heat internally. The landscape records these adjustments over centuries. Terraces, canyons, and channel bends reflect long-term patterns. Standing beside the Yellowstone River, far from any geyser, geothermal influence may not be obvious. Yet the same deep circulation still shapes flow and structure. Heat rises, water moves, and the park responds gradually. The system continues whether or not it is noticed. Water moving through Yellowstone also follows subtle elevation changes that shape speed and direction. Even small drops in height increase flow energy, while flatter stretches encourage spreading and mixing. The Yellowstone River illustrates this clearly as it leaves Yellowstone Lake. Its broad, slow movement through Hayden Valley contrasts sharply with its faster descent toward the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. In Hayden Valley, the river spreads and slows, allowing heat and minerals to disperse laterally. This wide, shallow movement acts like water poured onto a flat table, where flow thins and spreads rather than cutting deeply. As the river enters steeper terrain downstream, gravity takes over more forcefully. Water accelerates, energy concentrates, and erosion increases. This shift resembles moving from a gentle ramp to a staircase. Each drop adds momentum that reshapes the channel. The Firehole River shows a different pattern because geothermal heat enters continuously along its length. Instead of one source, multiple inputs maintain elevated temperatures over distance. This repeated warming acts like reheating water as it cools. Each addition extends the influence farther downstream. When the Firehole and Gibbon rivers merge to form the Madison River, their combined flow stabilizes temperature and chemistry. Mixing reduces extremes, creating a more balanced system. This blending behaves like combining hot and cold streams in a sink. The result is moderate rather than extreme. Yellowstone Lake responds differently because of its size and depth. Heat entering from below spreads slowly, influencing circulation rather than immediate flow. Wind plays a major role here by pushing surface water across the lake. That movement encourages mixing along shorelines while deeper layers remain more stable. This pattern resembles stirring only the top of a pot while the bottom stays relatively still. Energy distributes unevenly, shaping internal structure. Smaller lakes and ponds near geothermal areas behave more like shallow basins. They warm and cool quickly, responding rapidly to changes in air temperature and heat input. These shallow systems act like thin metal trays left in the sun. Temperature shifts happen quickly and reverse just as fast. Downstream of geothermal influence, rivers such as the Lamar offer contrast. Cold, clear flow highlights how much warmth alters behavior elsewhere. When the Lamar meets warmer waters, mixing creates visible and measurable transitions. Temperature differences smooth out gradually rather than disappearing instantly. These transition zones function like buffer regions. They absorb differences and prevent abrupt shifts. Over long distances, all these waters ultimately leave the park. The Yellowstone River continues north into Montana, carrying the park's influence far beyond its boundaries. By the time it reaches the Yellowstone Valley, geothermal heat has largely dissipated. What remains is structure shaped by centuries of earlier interaction. Sediment patterns, channel width, and bank shape still reflect Yellowstone's interior processes. History remains written into the river's form. Taken together, rivers and lakes serve as Yellowstone's connective tissue. They link deep heat to distant landscapes through steady motion. Each named river and lake represents a segment in that connection, None operates in isolation. Water enters, adjusts, and moves on. The system remains open rather than closed. This openness prevents buildup and allows continuous renewal. Energy flows through instead of accumulating. Heat rises from below, water carries it outward, and the landscape responds gradually. The pattern repeats without urgency. Once water spreads across Yellowstone through rivers and lakes, it begins shaping the ground in quieter, slower ways. Soils form where water lingers long enough to interact with rock, organic material, and air over many seasons. Yellowstone soils are relatively young because volcanic eruptions, glaciation, and erosion have repeatedly reset the surface. Many areas never develop deep soil layers, which strongly limits what plants can take hold. Much of the park sits on volcanic material, such as rhyolite and basalt, which weather into coarse mineral fragments. These fragments break down into sandy and silty particles that drain quickly but contain useful elements like potassium and calcium. One way to picture these soils is like a loosely packed sponge. Water passes through easily, but small pockets hold moisture long enough for roots to access it. In geothermal areas, mineral deposits accumulate faster than organic soil can form. Hot water brings dissolved material to the surface, where it cools and leaves behind solid residue. One common deposit is silica sinter, made primarily of silicon dioxide, released from hot water circulating through volcanic rock. As water cools, silica hardens into pale, ceramic-like crusts that limit root growth and prevent organic layers from building. Other areas accumulate travertine, a form of calcium carbonate deposited when carbon dioxide escapes from hot spring water. Travertine forms porous, cream-colored terraces that retain heat and channel water flow. These mineral surfaces change how water behaves at the ground level. Instead of soaking in, water often spreads laterally or evaporates quickly. Away from geothermal zones, organic material accumulates more reliably. Fallen needles, leaves, and grasses build a dark surface layer that improves moisture retention. Microorganisms drive this transformation. Bacteria and fungi break organic matter into usable nutrients that plants can absorb. Among these fungi are mycorrhizal species that connect plant roots to soil minerals. These networks trade nutrients for sugars produced by photosynthesis. In Yellowstone forests, these underground networks can link many trees at once. Resources move through them like shared accounts, rather than isolated reserves. The most widespread tree in the park is lodgepole pine, a tall, slender conifer with thin bark and tightly packed needles. It tolerates shallow soils, cold winters, and nutrient-poor conditions better than most competitors. Lodgepole pine forests often grow densely, creating uniform stands across large areas. Their shallow root systems spread outward to capture surface moisture. In shaded forest floors beneath lodgepole pine, light becomes the limiting factor. Plants such as pine grass and elk sedge occupy these low-light conditions. Along rivers and streams, soil conditions change dramatically. Repeated flooding deposits layers of fine sediment, forming alluvial soils. These soils support species that tolerate disturbance. One common example is coyote willow, a flexible shrub with narrow leaves and rapid regrowth. Coyote willow roots bind loose sediment together. This stabilizes stream banks while still allowing water to pass. In wetter, low-lying areas, water-tolerant plants such as sedges and rushes dominate. Their dense root mats slow erosion and trap additional sediment. Drier slopes and open flats often support big sagebrush, a woody shrub with silvery leaves adapted to conserve water. Its deep root system allows access to moisture stored far below the surface. Sagebrush soils tend to be thin and mineral-rich. Organic matter accumulates slowly under these conditions. Soil chemistry also influences plant distribution. Volcanic soils often contain abundant phosphorus and potassium, but limited nitrogen. Nitrogen enters the system through microbial activity and atmospheric deposition. Without these inputs, plant growth remains slow. Certain plants host nitrogen-fixing bacteria that convert atmospheric nitrogen into usable forms. This process acts like a slow-release fertilizer rather than a sudden nutrient pulse. Temperature strongly influences soil moisture. Warm ground increases evaporation, while shaded areas retain water longer. Snow cover plays a crucial role in regulating soil temperature. Snow insulates the ground, preventing deep freezing during winter. Slow snowmelt allows water to infiltrate deeply. Rapid melt produces runoff instead. Roots respond directly to these patterns. Fine roots grow where moisture remains reliable. Plants effectively map underground water availability through root placement. Growth follows moisture gradients rather than surface appearance. Fire reshapes soils and vegetation without destroying the system. Burning removes surface organic layers, but leaves mineral soil intact. Ash produced by fire contains concentrated nutrients such as phosphorus and potassium. These nutrients are immediately available to new plants. Lodgepole pine cones often open after exposure to heat. Seeds fall onto exposed soil with little competition. This explains why many lodgepole pine forests are even-aged. Large areas regenerate at the same time. Over decades, organic matter rebuilds. Needles and plant material accumulate again. Soil structure becomes more complex with each cycle. Water retention improves gradually. Microbial communities shift during this recovery. Different species dominate at different stages. These shifts alter nutrient availability. Plants respond accordingly. Soil and vegetation form feedback loops. Change in one reshapes the other. Across Yellowstone, soil properties vary over short distances. Moisture, depth, and mineral content can change within meters. These differences create mosaics of forest, meadow, and shrubland. Boundaries interlock rather than forming sharp edges. Elevation adds another layer of control. Higher elevations experience colder temperatures and shorter growing seasons. Soils develop more slowly in these zones. Organic matter accumulates at reduced rates. Plants adapt by growing slowly and conserving resources. Longevity matters more than speed. Lower elevations allow longer growing seasons. Soils warm earlier and retain moisture longer. These areas support greater plant diversity. Meadows expand and forests grow taller. Soil acts as the interface between water, rock, air, and life. Everything passes through it before becoming part of the ecosystem. One way to think about soil is as Yellowstone's mixing bowl. Inputs combine and transform before moving onward. Change happens continuously but quietly. Adjustments accumulate over time. Vegetation reflects these underlying processes. Distribution follows physics more than chance. The ground records the history of water, fire, and climate. Each layer preserves past conditions. As conditions shift, soils respond first. Plants follow. This sequence allows Yellowstone to remain flexible. The system adjusts without losing continuity. Soil texture also influences how quickly roots can explore new ground. Sandy soils allow rapid penetration, while finer silts and clays slow root growth but retain moisture longer. Time in Yellowstone becomes clearer when watched across a full year rather than measured day by day. Seasonal change links snow, water, plants, insects and animals into a schedule that repeats with variation rather than precision. Cold settles first at higher elevations, such as the Absaroka Range, where thinner air loses heat quickly. Snow accumulates in layers that compress under their own weight, creating a seasonal cover that can last well into spring. Snow does more than signal winter. It insulates the ground the way attic insulation slows heat loss from a house. Because of this insulation, soil beneath snow stays warmer than exposed air. Microbes, roots, and fungal networks remain active at low levels instead of shutting down completely. A useful way to think about winter biology is standby mode rather than power off. Systems reduce output, but stay ready to scale up when conditions improve. Snow also stores water. Each storm adds to a reservoir that will not be released until temperatures rise. This storage works like a delayed delivery system. Water arrives months after it falls, spreading supply across time. How fast snow releases water depends on sunlight, air temperature, and wind. Warm afternoons accelerate melt, while cold nights refreeze the surface and slow release. Meltwater follows several routes. Some flows across the surface, but much of it infiltrates soil and fractured volcanic rock. This infiltration delays runoff. The system behaves like a sponge connected to pipes, holding water briefly before routing it towards streams. The timing of melt shapes river behavior. Slow melt spreads flow across weeks, while rapid melt concentrates water into shorter surges. The Yellowstone River responds predictably to this timing as it leaves Yellowstone Lake and flows through Hayden Valley. Flow rises in late spring, then gradually declines as snow sources diminish. The Firehole River behaves differently because geothermal heat keeps water warmer through winter. Ice forms less readily, changing how heat escapes and how sediment settles. This difference acts like a thermostat set slightly higher. Seasonal rhythm remains intact, but extremes soften. The Gibbon River shows an intermediate pattern. It cools and freezes more than the Firehole, but still reflects geothermal influence near Norris Geyser Basin. When the Firehole and Gibbon merge to form the Madison River, their seasonal signals blend. Temperature and chemistry moderate rather than amplify. Lakes respond to seasons differently because water remains in place longer. Yellowstone Lake organizes itself into layers based on temperature and density. Cold water sinks while warmer water floats, creating vertical structure. These layers behave like stacked shelves that resist mixing. Spring weakens this structure as surface water warms to match deeper layers. Wind can then mix the lake more thoroughly. This mixing redistributes oxygen and nutrients. It works like slowly shaking a jar until contents blend evenly. Summer strengthens layering again. Deep water stays cold, while surface water warms. This separation limits oxygen delivery to depth. Chemical reactions slow and reorganize. Autumn reverses the process as surface water cools and sinks. Layers break down, and the lake resets before winter. Seasonal timing also controls soil moisture. Gradual snowmelt infiltrates deeply, recharging soils for months. Rapid melt overwhelms infiltration. More water runs off, leaving soils drier later. Plants respond directly to this difference. Root growth tracks moisture reliability rather than total rainfall. This behavior resembles budgeting rather than spending freely. Consistency matters more than abundance. Lodgepole pine remains evergreen through winter, but growth occurs only when soil's warm. Short growing seasons slow wood production and favor durability. Quaking aspen responds differently because it drops leaves and rebuilds each spring. Leaf emergence tracks temperature closely, making it sensitive to early or late warming. Understory plants exploit brief spring light before full canopy development. Species such as spring beauty and glacier lily grow and flower rapidly during this window. This window functions like an early opening in a daily schedule. Plants that use it gain energy before shade increases. Insects follow seasonal timing with precision. Many species overwinter as eggs or larvae rather than adults. One common example is the stonefly, whose larvae develop in cold streams beneath ice. Adults emerge in early spring, providing food for birds when other insects are scarce. Caddisfly larvae follow a similar pattern. They build protective cases from sand or plant fragments and remain active in streams through winter. This strategy works like wearing layered clothing. Protection allows slow but continuous activity. On land, bumblebee queens overwinter alone beneath soil or leaf litter. They emerge early in spring to establish new colonies. This timing gives bumblebees access to early flowering plants. Pollination begins before many competitors appear. Mosquitoes follow a different schedule. Eggs laid in summer overwinter in soil and hatch when snowmelt floods shallow pools. This emergence often coincides with warming temperatures and standing water. Timing maximizes survival. Seasonal insect pulses influence food availability. Birds such as American robins and mountain bluebirds time nesting to match peak insect abundance. This alignment reduces foraging effort. Energy spent finding food decreases when supply peaks. Soil organisms also respond to thawing in waves. Activity increases first near the surface, then deeper as warmth penetrates. This progression resembles a slow wake-up rather than a sudden start. Systems re-engage layer by layer. Water temperature controls reaction rates. Colder water slows chemical processes. Warmer water accelerates them. This relationship sets the pace of nutrient cycling. Timing matters as much as quantity. Animals respond to seasonal change by adjusting movement. Plains bison remain year-round, shifting feeding locations rather than migrating. Their ability to clear snow exposes buried grasses. This works like accessing stored supplies rather than searching for new ones. Elk and mule deer respond by changing elevation and habitat. They move toward lower snow depth and better forage availability. These movements follow a simple energy rule. Calories gained must exceed calories spent. Predators respond without forcing these shifts. Grey wolves track herds that concentrate in winter ranges. This tracking resembles following predictable routes rather than random searching. Concentration increases encounter efficiency. Spring introduces a sharp increase in demand. Newborn animals arrive as plant growth accelerates. Timing here is critical. Birth aligns with peak forage quality. This alignment works like scheduling heavy work when resources are highest. Mistiming raises survival cost. Summer adds heat stress and water demand. Animals shift feeding to cooler parts of the day. These daily adjustments layer onto seasonal rhythms. Time becomes structured by hours as well as months. Geothermal areas soften seasonal extremes. Warm ground reduces snow accumulation, creating persistent access points. These areas act like islands of availability. Grazers use them, and predators learn where movement concentrates. Seasonal change also affects sound. Snow absorbs vibration differently than summer soil. Winter sound travels farther across open terrain. Summer vegetation dampens it. These changes influence behavior subtly. Movement and communication adjust without planning. Seasonal rhythm therefore acts as a regulator. No single process dominates continuously. Variation distributes pressure. Stability emerges from change rather than sameness. Some years bring early melt, others late. Each variation tests flexibility. Plants adjust growth timing. Insects adjust emergence. Rivers adjust flow. Lakes adjust layering. Nothing resets completely. Each season builds on the last. One way to think about the year here is as a rotating handoff. Snow holds water, melt releases it, plants capture it, insects convert it, animals redistribute it, and timing resets the cycle. The handoff repeats without instruction. Temperature, light, and gravity keep the schedule. As colder air returns, snow begins accumulating again. Ground heat persists below, water continues moving slowly, and living systems prepare without stopping entirely. Sound also changes after sunset, and the reason lies in air density. Cooler air transmits low-frequency sound more efficiently than warm air. A geyser vent in the upper geyser basin can be heard from farther away at night than during the afternoon. Hissing and splashing travel across open ground with less loss. In forests, sound behaves differently. Lodgepole pine stands absorb higher frequencies and scatter lower ones. This creates alternating zones of quiet and audibility. Movement becomes easier to detect without being seen. Insects respond quickly to these temperature shifts. Many daytime insects reduce activity as light fades, while others emerge. One group that becomes active after sunset is moths, including species that pollinate evening-blooming plants, such as evening primrose. These moths navigate using scent and contrast rather than color. Crickets and katydids add a different layer of sound to the night. Their call rate increases with temperature and slows as air cools. This relationship is so consistent that call frequency can estimate temperature within a few degrees. Sound becomes a functional signal rather than background noise. Aquatic insects follow a different schedule. Mayflies and midges often emerge at dusk from rivers such as the Firehole and Gibbon. Their emergence concentrates food along river corridors. Insect density increases rapidly near water. Little brown bats take advantage of this timing. They forage along rivers where insect movement becomes predictable. Echolocation allows bats to detect insects by bouncing sound waves off moving wings. Rivers act like feeding lanes rather than random hunting space. Amphibians respond as well. Boreal chorus frogs and Columbia spotted frogs increase activity near wetlands after dark. Cooler air reduces water loss through their skin. Night movement conserves moisture while reducing exposure. Plants experience night as an active period rather than a pause. Photosynthesis stops, but respiration continues. Energy captured during daylight is redistributed through tissues overnight. Growth efficiency depends on this balance. Many plants partially close stomata after sunset. This reduces water loss during cooler hours. The process works like closing vents in a building overnight. Moisture is conserved until morning. Soil temperature drops more slowly than air temperature. Heat stored during the day releases gradually after sunset. This slow release prevents abrupt changes underground. Microbial activity decelerates rather than stopping. Fungi and bacteria continue breaking down organic material overnight. Nutrient release remains steady. Predators take advantage of these conditions. Wolves often travel farther at night when prey visibility decreases. Movement increases because risk shifts rather than disappears. Darkness changes the rules of detection. Mountain lions benefit even more from low light. Ambush hunting becomes more effective, as contrast replaces detail. Ungulates respond by altering resting locations. Open ground may feel safer than forest edges after dark. This reversal highlights how context matters. Risk depends on light as much as location. Night also alters scent behavior. Cooler air limits vertical mixing, allowing odors to linger closer to the ground. Predators and prey both use this information. Smell becomes more reliable than sight. In valleys, temperature inversions often form overnight. Cold air becomes trapped beneath warmer air. This inversion acts like a lid. Sound and scent spread horizontally rather than upward. Dew forms as surfaces cool below air temperature. Moisture condenses on grasses and soil. This condensation affects insects first. Wing loading increases and activity slows. Plants benefit from this moisture. Small amounts of water supplement soil reserves. Water chemistry shifts slightly overnight as streams cool. Cooler water holds more dissolved oxygen. Rivers gain oxygen during night hours. Aquatic organisms experience improved conditions. By morning, sunlight reverses these gradients again. Cold air drains away, and surface warming resumes. The transition from night to day is gradual rather than abrupt. Systems shift speed without changing direction. One way to think about day and night here is as alternating gears. Each engages different processes without stopping the system. Seasonal timing sets the broad rhythm. Night refines it, hour by hour. Nothing resets fully between sunset and sunrise. Processes continue with adjusted pacing. Heat keeps rising from below. Water keeps moving through ground and channel. Plants continue respiring. Animals continue adjusting. The landscape remains active even when visibility drops. Quiet does not mean stillness. Moonlight introduces another layer of variation at night. Its presence changes visibility without adding heat, altering behavior without shifting temperature. During full moon periods, open areas such as Hayden Valley and Pelican Valley become brighter for several hours. This added light increases contrast rather than detail, which benefits some species and disadvantages others. Predators that rely on silhouette detection gain an advantage in open terrain. Prey species often respond by increasing use of cover during brighter nights. This adjustment works like changing routes based on street lighting. The destination stays the same, but the path shifts. Cloud cover can reverse this effect completely. Thick clouds block moonlight and trap outgoing heat, keeping night temperatures slightly higher. Under cloudy skies, sound travels differently as well. Moist air absorbs some high frequencies while allowing low frequencies to carry. This combination changes how far calls and movements can be detected. Information travels, but its quality shifts. Wind adds another variable. Light wind mixes air layers, reducing temperature inversions and dispersing scent. Stronger wind breaks up these layers entirely. Odor and sound become less reliable cues. This uncertainty alters movement patterns. Animals reduce long-distance travel and focus on shorter, familiar routes. Night insects respond to wind immediately. Moths fly lower and mosquitoes stay closer to vegetation. Their behavior resembles aircraft flying under low visibility conditions. Altitude drops when stability decreases. Plants also register these night conditions. Leaf temperature responds to wind speed as heat is stripped away. This cooling can reduce respiration rate slightly. Energy conservation becomes more efficient. In geothermal areas such as Norris Geyser Basin, night wind can shift steam plumes dramatically. Warm air rises, but wind bends and disperses it. This makes heat distribution uneven across short distances. One path stays warm, while another cools quickly. Animals learn these patterns over time. Repeated experience builds spatial memory, tied to temperature and shelter. Night, therefore, becomes a learning period, as much as a resting one. Information accumulates through movement. Across weeks and months, these nightly adjustments influence seasonal survival. Small advantages compound. A slightly warmer resting site reduces energy loss. A predictable feeding corridor saves calories. Over time, these savings matter as much as food quantity. Survival often hinges on efficiency rather than abundance. This perspective helps explain why behavior changes can matter more than population changes. The system responds through choice rather than force. Each night rewrites conditions slightly. The following day inherits those outcomes. The rhythm continues without pause. Day and night trade controls smoothly. Seasonal timing sets the frame. Night fills in the details. Nothing stops moving when light fades. It simply changes how information travels. As autumn advances, daylight shortens because Earth's axis is tilted, and the sun follows a lower arc across the sky at Yellowstone's latitude. A lower arc means sunlight arrives at a shallower angle, spreads the same energy over a larger area, and delivers less heating per hour. Less incoming energy changes the daily balance between gain and loss. The ground, water, and air begin each day with less stored warmth, so cooling begins earlier and runs longer. Nighttime cooling increases because surfaces radiate heat away continuously once the sun is gone. With longer nights, there is simply more time for that radiative loss to continue before sunrise can slow it. Air also cools by contact with the ground. As rocks, soil, and vegetation cool, they remove heat from the thin layer of air touching them, and that cooling spreads upward by mixing. Water temperatures drop for two main reasons that work together. First, air temperatures are lower and nights are longer, so water loses heat to the air for more hours each day through conduction, convection, and evaporation. Second, the sun warms water less effectively in autumn. The lower sun angle delivers less direct heating, and shorter days reduce the total time available for solar energy to enter the river or lake. Flowing rivers respond quickly because they are constantly exchanging heat with the air. A river is like a moving ribbon of water with a large surface area, so heat loss happens efficiently as it travels. Smaller streams cool even faster because they hold less thermal mass. This difference is like comparing a shallow pan to a large pot, where the pan reaches air temperature much more quickly. Along the Yellowstone River below Fishing Bridge, cooling is slower near the water than out in open meadow, because the river releases stored heat gradually. Even so, the overall trend continues, because the river cannot keep adding heat when the sun is providing less and less. The Madison River shows a similar pattern downstream of Madison Junction, where the Firehole and Gibbon merge. Geothermal input lifts the baseline temperature, but it does not cancel the seasonal direction, because heat loss still increases as nights lengthen. Geothermal basins remain steady sources of ground heat. Norris Geyser Basin, the Upper Geyser Basin, and Midway Geyser Basin keep releasing warmth because their heat comes from below rather than from the sun. This steady input becomes more noticeable in autumn because the background cools. The contrast increases, like a lamp looking brighter when the room lights dim. Steam looks thicker for the same reason. Cooler air condenses water vapor more easily, so the visible plume grows, even if the vent output stays similar. Sound also seems sharper on clear cold nights because cooler air is denser and carries low frequencies with less loss. In valleys, temperature inversions can trap sound near the ground, letting hissing vents and flowing outflows travel farther across open basins. Insects adjust to temperature thresholds rather than calendar dates. Muscle function and wing movement depend on temperature, so flight becomes harder as air cools. Stoneflies remain active later in the year because their life cycle is built for cold water. Their larvae develop in streams under low temperatures, and emergence can continue when many other insects have already stopped flying. Caddisfly larvae persist through cold periods by staying in the water and sheltering inside cases made from sand grains or plant fragments. That case works like body armor, reducing damage from current and helping the larva stay anchored while it feeds. As air cools, insects concentrate near warmer microhabitats. Along the Firehole River and parts of the Madison, slightly warmer water supports dusk swarms of midges longer into autumn. This concentration makes feeding routes more predictable for bats. Little brown bats patrol river corridors because insect density is higher there than in colder open meadows. Bird timing shifts as well. American robins and mountain bluebirds track insect availability, and when insects become scarce, feeding effort rises sharply. This is one reason mistakes become more costly in autumn. When food is abundant, a poor choice of foraging spot wastes time, but the next patch is still likely to be productive. When food becomes patchy, time and energy have a higher price. A wrong turn can mean a long flight or walk to the next usable patch, and the calories spent are harder to replace before night cooling deepens. Cold also raises the basic cost of staying warm. Every extra hour spent exposed to wind or sitting on cold ground increases heat loss, and the body must burn more energy to maintain temperature. A useful analogy is a bank account with higher fees. The same behavior that was affordable in summer becomes expensive in autumn because the cost per hour increases. Water temperature drops also affect fish directly. Cutthroat trout slow metabolism in cooler water, which reduces feeding intensity and changes where they hold in the current. This shift changes the whole food web timing. Fewer fish feeding at the surface means fewer surface insects taken, and more insects remain available for birds and bats, but only during narrow windows. Plants respond to shorter days with chemical preparation rather than visible motion. Quaking aspen withdraw nutrients from leaves into stems and roots, which preserves resources for next spring. This withdrawal is like packing supplies into storage. Leaves are abandoned only after valuable materials are reclaimed. Frost becomes more frequent as nights lengthen and skies clear. Clear skies allow faster radiative cooling, which drops surface temperatures below the surrounding air and triggers ice formation on grasses and soil. Plants reduce freezing damage by concentrating sugars and other solutes inside cells. Those solutes lower the freezing point and limit ice crystal growth, functioning like antifreeze in a cooling system. Many insects use similar chemistry. Glycerol and related compounds lower freezing points, allowing larvae or eggs to survive temperatures that would otherwise rupture tissues. In valleys like Hayden Valley and Lamar Valley, cold air pooling increases frost risk. Cold air behaves like water in a basin, settling and deepening overnight until sunrise breaks the inversion. This pooling makes nightly conditions more predictable. Scent trails stabilize, and sound spreads farther along the valley floor. Predators and prey both react to this predictability. Wolves adjust travel routes to intersect movement corridors, while elk and mule deer adjust bedding sites to reduce wind exposure and heat loss. When foliage thins, mountain lions rely more on terrain than vegetation for concealment. Steep slopes, boulder fields, and forest edges become more important because they provide consistent structure even after leaves fall. Autumn therefore becomes a period where timing and location must be chosen more carefully. Energy is still flowing through the system, but it is flowing through narrower channels, so the cost of being in the wrong place at the wrong time rises. Rivers reflect this transition as well as the air does. As more precipitation is stored as snow instead of entering streams immediately, flow declines and water cools further because there is less warm runoff and more direct exposure to cold air. Oxygen solubility increases as water cools, which can improve conditions for overwintering aquatic life. At the same time, chemical reaction rates slow, so the whole aquatic system shifts toward conservation rather than rapid turnover. Autumn advances through many small steps rather than a single switch. Each night lengthens slightly, each day delivers slightly less energy, and the landscape responds through repeated adjustment rather than abrupt change. As autumn deepens, preparation begins replacing exploration, and this shift shows up clearly in how water, plants, insects, and animals manage energy. The system moves from short-term adjustment toward long-term conservation. One of the clearest signs of this transition appears in water storage. Increasing snowfall remains locked at higher elevations, reducing immediate runoff into rivers. Streams such as the Yellowstone River and Lamar River show declining base flow as precipitation shifts from liquid to solid. This change is not a loss of water, but a delay in delivery. A useful analogy is inventory being moved into a warehouse. Access becomes limited, but supply is preserved for later use. Soil moisture stabilizes as evaporation drops with cooler air and shorter days. Reduced evaporation allows moisture to persist even as plant growth slows. Plants respond by shifting energy into storage tissues. Sugars produced during daylight are transported into roots, stems, and underground structures. This transfer resembles moving money from checking into savings. Immediate spending slows while reserves increase. Perennial grasses such as Idaho fescue and blue bunch wheatgrass follow this pattern closely. Above-ground growth declines while root mass increases. These roots anchor soil through winter and provide fuel for spring regrowth. Survival depends more on stored energy than visible growth. Shrubs adopt different strategies. Big sagebrush alters leaf chemistry by increasing waxes and resins that reduce water loss and limit freezing damage. These changes improve tolerance rather than growth. Endurance replaces expansion. Trees make similar adjustments. Lodgepole pine continues photosynthesis on mild days, but metabolic rate slows as daylight shortens. Growth rings narrow accordingly. Each ring records seasonal energy allocation. Insects respond strongly to decreasing day length rather than temperature alone. Photoperiod provides a reliable seasonal signal that does not fluctuate year to year. Many insects enter diapause, a hormonally controlled pause in development. Diapause functions like suspending a program at a safe checkpoint. Stoneflies such as Zapada columbiana continue larval development in cold streams beneath ice. Their enzymes remain effective at low temperatures, This adaptation allows activity when competitors withdraw. Cold tolerance becomes an advantage rather than a limitation. Caddisfly larvae, including Brachycentrus species, remain active inside protective cases built from sand and plant fragments. These cases reduce current stress and heat loss. The strategy works like wearing layered clothing. Protection allows slow but continuous feeding. On land, insects such as ground beetles overwinter beneath soil and leaf litter. Their flattened bodies reduce exposure and conserve moisture. Emergence timing becomes critical. Leaving shelter too early risks starvation. Birds respond by shifting feeding strategies rather than migrating immediately. Ravens and American crows increase scavenging activity as insect availability declines. Scavenging reduces energy spent searching. Predictability replaces variety. Small mammals adjust movement patterns. Voles such as Microtus montanus reduce surface activity and remain close to cover. This behavior minimizes heat loss and predation risk. Energy conservation becomes the primary goal. Snow eventually amplifies this strategy. Even shallow snow increases resistance to movement and raises energy cost. Subnivean spaces form beneath snowpack as heat from soil melts the lowest layer. These spaces act as insulated corridors for small mammals. The structure resembles crawl spaces beneath a building. Movement continues while exposure drops. Predators respond by focusing on access points rather than open pursuit. Location matters more than speed. Owls benefit greatly from this shift. Great horned owls use asymmetrical ear placement to detect prey beneath snow. Sound reaches each ear at slightly different times. This difference allows precise localization even without visual cues. The facial disc acts like a parabolic reflector. Sound is focused toward the ears with minimal loss. Great gray owls show this adaptation even more strongly. They hunt almost entirely by sound, plunging through snow to capture prey they cannot see. This hunting method works because snow transmits low-frequency sound efficiently. The owl detects movement beneath the surface. Predation becomes more selective rather than more frequent. Energy efficiency matters more than kill count. Water chemistry mirrors this conservation phase. As temperatures fall, reaction rates slow. Nutrient cycling becomes more conservative. Resources remain in stable forms, rather than moving rapidly between states. Lakes reflect this clearly. Yellowstone Lake stores remaining heat at depth as surface layers cool. Stratification strengthens temporarily. Movement slows and storage increases. Streams show similar stabilization. Reduced turbulence limits mixing and maintains predictable conditions. The system favors reliability over productivity. Stability replaces output. Even soundscape changes reflect this shift. Fewer insects call, and animal movement decreases. Silence increases not because life stops, but because activity becomes localized. Energy concentrates in protected spaces. Wind becomes more influential as foliage thins. Increased airflow raises convective heat loss. Sheltered terrain gains importance. Animals select bedding sites that block wind and trap warmth. Poor choices now carry compounding cost. Recovery time lengthens as nights grow colder. This is why preparation replaces experimentation. The landscape rewards foresight. Across Yellowstone, these responses align without coordination. Light, temperature, and duration provide shared cues. The system converges naturally. No instruction is required. Autumn therefore acts as a narrowing funnel. Many paths remain possible, but fewer are efficient. Those that work become reinforced through repeated use. Memory forms quickly. Flexibility gives way to reliability. Patterns stabilize. Nothing stops moving. Motion becomes selective rather than expansive. Foxes, such as the red fox, adjust hunting strategy as snow deepens. They rely on acute hearing to detect small mammals beneath the surface, using vertical pounces that minimize energy loss. Coyotes respond differently by extending travel distance rather than precision. Their endurance allows them to patrol larger areas, trading efficiency for coverage. Ungulates refine bedding behavior further as ground cools. Elk often choose south-facing slopes, where sunlight shortens frost duration. This choice reduces overnight heat loss. Orientation becomes a thermal decision rather than a visual one. Rivers continue cooling, but remain chemically active. Colder water increases dissolved oxygen, which supports overwintering aquatic insects. These insects maintain low metabolic rates. Survival depends on steady conditions rather than rapid growth. Soils also enter a buffered state. Temperature swings decrease with depth, protecting roots and microbes. This buffering works like thermal inertia. Change slows as mass increases. Across the landscape, these adjustments converge quietly. Systems prepare not by stopping, but by narrowing options. As winter approaches, timing becomes less about preparation and more about execution. Systems stop testing options and begin relying on routines that have already proven reliable. Snow depth increases steadily, and this changes the cost of movement across the landscape. Each additional centimeter adds resistance, turning travel into work rather than motion. Ungulates respond by narrowing travel corridors. Elk concentrate movement along packed trails near the Yellowstone River and Madison River, where snow is shallower and footing more predictable. These corridors function like maintained roads compared with unbroken ground. Energy expenditure drops when paths are reused rather than forged anew. Bison reinforce this effect through repeated passage. Their mass compresses snow into firm tracks that remain usable long after storms pass. This compression acts like rolling a path through deep sand. Once compacted, movement requires less effort. Mule deer and pronghorn adjust differently. They avoid the deepest snow entirely, shifting toward windswept ridges and south-facing slopes, where accumulation remains lower. Wind exposure becomes an asset rather than a liability. Blown snow reduces depth and reveals forage. South-facing slopes receive more winter sunlight. Even weak solar input shortens frost duration and loosens surface snow. This difference may amount to only a few degrees. Over long nights, those degrees save energy. Rivers continue shaping winter behavior. Open water along the Firehole River and Gibbon River creates linear zones of reduced snow and milder air. These zones attract repeated use. Animals learn their locations and return night after night. Thermal basins such as Norris Geyser Basin maintain patches of exposed ground. Heat from below keeps snow from accumulating even during heavy storms. These areas act like emergency access points. They do not support the whole population, but they reduce pressure during the hardest conditions. Small mammals rely increasingly on sub-Nivean spaces beneath snowpack. Voles and deer mice create tunnel networks that connect feeding sites with resting areas. The snow above acts as insulation. Temperatures inside these spaces remain far more stable than surface air. This stability is critical because small mammals lose heat rapidly. Reducing exposure matters more than finding new food. Predators adapt by targeting access points. Coyotes and foxes focus hunting where tunnels meet openings near rocks, logs, or shrubs. This strategy resembles checking doorways rather than searching entire rooms. Efficiency replaces coverage. Owls refine this approach further. Great grey owls hunt almost exclusively where snow depth and density allow sound transmission. They select meadows with light, dry snow rather than heavy crusted layers. Snow quality becomes as important as prey presence. What carries forward after winter matters more than the moment when snow begins to retreat. Conditions set during cold months continue shaping water, soil, plants, and animals long after surface change becomes visible. Yellowstone does not reset with the calendar. It accumulates effects through repetition, allowing small seasonal differences to compound into lasting structure. Delayed cause and effect governs most outcomes in the park. Shifts in temperature, moisture, or disturbance often express themselves years later through altered growth, movement, or survival. Because responses are delayed, stability can exist alongside ongoing change. Adjustment happens quietly, spreading pressure across time rather than concentrating it into a single moment. Snowmelt timing provides a clear illustration of this lag. Earlier melt may appear beneficial at first, yet its strongest effects often arrive later through extended late summer dryness. Soils respond before vegetation does. Reduced moisture persistence limits microbial activity and nutrient transport long before plants show visible stress. Root systems then adjust to these altered conditions. Shallow rooting becomes more common where deep moisture is no longer reliable. These structural changes influence plants months or years after the original melt pattern shifted. What looks like a sudden decline often began as a slow rearrangement underground. Rivers translate repetition into geometry rather than events. Repeated high flows widen bends, rebuild floodplains, and shift channels incrementally. Function changes before form becomes obvious. Access to side channels or shallow margins can disappear long before the river looks different from a distance. Floodplain vegetation responds to this functional shift. Cottonwoods establish only when flood timing aligns with seed release across several consecutive years. Failure leaves little immediate trace. Mature trees persist, masking recruitment gaps that only become apparent decades later. Streams also respond through temperature and velocity patterns. Sustained warming or cooling alters aquatic habitat suitability long before populations adjust. Fish survival reflects these accumulated conditions. Spawning success depends on repeated alignment between flow, temperature, and substrate, rather than any single season. Forests respond to repetition through density and age structure. Fire intervals that recur shape regeneration more strongly than fire size or intensity. Where timing aligns, forests rebuild predictably. Where it does not, open ground or shrubland persists without signaling abrupt loss. Aspen groves demonstrate how memory can persist without visibility. Clonal root systems remain alive even when repeated browsing prevents stems from escaping into taller structure. The grove survives genetically while its form thins. Structural decline becomes apparent only after long delay. Grasslands record time through soil depth and root mass. Repeated grazing and moisture patterns determine whether open ground remains productive or gradually hardens into lower return forage. Energy cost rises before biomass disappears. Animals abandon use quietly as efficiency declines. Animals integrate these changes through movement rather than analysis. Seasonal routes persist because they reduce effort over time. Paths remain useful until repeated use no longer pays. Abandonment happens gradually, not suddenly. Large grazers respond first to declining efficiency. Increased travel cost shapes feeding decisions long before forage appears scarce. This response redistributes pressure across the landscape. Areas fall out of use without being depleted. Predators respond to vulnerability shaped earlier. Predation success rises after prey. Resilience has already declined. The effect can appear sudden. In reality, the system has been adjusting invisibly for years. Learning carries information forward within populations. Routes, shelter, and timing are remembered because topography and hydrology change slowly. Memory reduces risky experimentation. Survival improves without requiring genetic change. Small mammals compress these dynamics into shorter spans. Burrow placement and tunnel depth respond to repeated snow conditions rather than isolated storms. Sound transmission through snow becomes a limiting factor. Hunting success depends on snow structure as much as prey density. Information limits therefore matter alongside resource limits. Access can fail even when food remains present. At the smallest scale, microbes anchor change through chemistry. Nutrient availability and soil structure reorganize before plants and animals respond. Because microbial shifts occur quickly, they signal change early. Visible outcomes follow later through vegetation and movement. Carbon cycling reflects this delay clearly. Decomposition rates adjust to sustained moisture and temperature patterns rather than daily variation. Organic layers build or thin slowly. Their depth influences water retention long after conditions shift. Nitrogen availability follows a similar pattern. Microbial conversion rates respond to repeated warmth or cold rather than brief anomalies. Plant growth responds only after these chemical adjustments persist. Productivity changes lag behind environmental signals. This layered response creates inertia. The system resists rapid change while remaining responsive to sustained pressure. Limits therefore narrow quietly. Use declines before collapse becomes possible. Energy cost provides the earlier signal. Movement, feeding, or growth becomes less efficient before failure occurs. This gradual narrowing allows selective retreat. Pathways that still return net energy remain active. Others fade without drama. Absence replaces loss. Because of this process, Yellowstone rarely experiences abrupt ecological failure. Change is absorbed through reorganization rather than breakdown. Recovery follows the same logic. New arrangements emerge based on current constraints rather than past states. This is why recovery is not return. Structure reforms under new conditions while carrying traces of what came before. Time coordinates these transitions. Effects arrive when alignment persists, not when change first appears. The system therefore waits. Confirmation matters more than speed. Winter illustrates this discipline clearly. Release does not follow the first increase in light. Snow remains, soils stay cold, and water stays locked. The system requires multiple signals to align. When release finally begins, pathways are already prepared. Adjustment proceeds smoothly, rather than explosively. This preparation explains why Yellowstone can shift without breaking. The landscape moves slowly enough to remain coherent. Across decades, these processes accumulate. Structure records what repetition has tested and retained. What persists is not balance at a moment. It is continuity across time. As repetition continues shaping structure, geology becomes an active participant rather than a static backdrop. Rock type, fracture density, and elevation determine how water and heat move long after surface conditions change. Yellowstone's volcanic foundation creates a ground that is lighter and more permeable than most mountain terrain. This permeability allows water to circulate deeply, absorbing heat and minerals before returning to the surface. The circulation does not operate at human speed. Water may spend years underground, accumulating energy and chemistry before emerging far from where it entered. Because of this delay, geothermal influence often appears disconnected from recent weather. Activity reflects long-term circulation rather than current precipitation. Mineral deposition records this slow movement. Silica, calcium carbonate, and other dissolved materials settle gradually as hot water cools. Over time, these deposits alter underground pathways. Flow is redirected quietly, changing surface expression without stopping the system. Geysers become less active, not because heat disappears, but because channels narrow or reroute. Nearby vents may strengthen as pressure redistributes. This reorganization resembles traffic adjusting after a lane closes. Movement continues, but routes change. Surface stability therefore masks constant adjustment below. The system reorganizes without collapse. Water emerging from geothermal areas carries its history outward. Warm runoff joins streams, influencing temperature and chemistry beyond basin boundaries. Even small inputs matter when they persist. Consistent warmth alters ice formation, sediment settling, and biological timing. Rivers integrate these inputs slowly. Temperature changes spread downstream over distance rather than appearing instantly. Because water keeps moving, influence fades gradually rather than stopping abruptly. Transitions replace boundaries. Lakes extend this integration further. Large volumes of water store heat and nutrients long enough to smooth short-term variation. Yellowstone Lake exemplifies this buffering. Its depth and size allow it to absorb change without rapid response. Thermal input enters locally, but circulation distributes it broadly. The lake responds as a whole rather than as isolated patches. This integration affects biological timing. Spawning, growth, and feeding align with average conditions rather than daily extremes. Geology also shapes surface water availability through topography. Basins collect water, ridges shed it, and slopes determine speed of movement. These features change slowly. Their persistence allows learning and route fidelity across generations. Animals move according to these stable features. Paths follow valleys, ridgelines, and crossings that reduce effort over time. Movement therefore reflects geology as much as vegetation. Rock and relief shape behavior indirectly. Soils form where geology, water, and biology intersect. Volcanic minerals weather into coarse substrates that drain quickly but hold useful elements. Organic matter accumulates slowly in cold conditions. Soil depth reflects centuries of balance between input and decay. This depth influences water retention. Deeper soils buffer dry periods longer than thin ones. Plants respond accordingly. Species with deep roots persist where moisture remains reliable. Shallow-rooted species dominate where drainage is rapid. Composition shifts quietly as conditions repeat. Fire interacts with these soil differences. Burning removes organic layers temporarily, but leaves mineral structure intact. Recovery depends on what follows. Moist years rebuild organic matter, while dry years leave soils exposed longer. Repeated cycles shape long-term soil character. Nutrient availability and water retention adjust over decades. Vegetation structure responds to this foundation. Forests densify or thin based on repeated success or failure. Grasslands remain open where soils and grazing reinforce shallow structure. Shrubs advance where moisture and reduced pressure allow. Animals integrate these plant responses through movement. Grazing pressure shifts based on forage quality rather than abundance alone. Large grazers seek efficiency. Short grasses with high nutritional return attract repeated use. As structure changes, snow behavior changes too. Taller vegetation traps snow, increasing winter travel cost. Energy cost rises incrementally. Animals respond by shifting routes before forage disappears. This response redistributes pressure across the landscape. Areas fall out of use without degradation. Predators track these shifts indirectly. Concentrated movement increases encounter probability. Predation appears to intensify after redistribution. Vulnerability accumulates before detection. This lag explains apparent sudden changes. The mechanism operates earlier than the outcome. Small mammals respond faster, but at smaller scales. Burrow placement reflects repeated snow depth and soil firmness. Tunnel systems adapt to conditions that persist. Temporary storms matter less than average winters. Sound transmission through snow becomes a governing factor. Hunting success depends on snow structure rather than prey numbers alone. Owls adjust hunting grounds accordingly. Meadows with suitable snow quality remain active while others are abandoned. This selectivity conserves energy. Efficiency matters more than coverage. Microbial communities respond at yet another pace. Chemistry shifts rapidly with sustained moisture or temperature change. Nutrient cycling accelerates or slows accordingly. These shifts set limits for plant growth long before leaves change. Plants respond only after chemistry stabilizes. Growth reflects availability averaged over time. This layered response creates inertia. Systems resist brief disturbance while adapting to persistence. Because of inertia, Yellowstone avoids rapid swings. Change arrives only after confirmation. Confirmation requires repetition. 1 year rarely determines outcome. This requirement filters noise from signal. Only sustained change matters. The filtering protects coherence. Adjustment replaces reaction. Across decades, these mechanisms interact continuously. Geology, water, soil, plants, and animals hand conditions forward. No single layer controls the system. Influence emerges through connection. This connectivity allows Yellowstone to remain flexible without becoming unstable. Diversity of pathways provides resilience. When one pathway closes, another may remain open. Flow continues. This is why limits narrow rather than collapse. Opportunity declines gradually. Recovery follows the same principle. New pathways open only after conditions persist. The system therefore avoids overshoot. Expansion waits for support. Time coordinates this behavior. Delay becomes a stabilizing force. What appears static is often simply slow. Motion continues beneath the surface. These long-scale interactions explain why Yellowstone endures disturbance without losing identity. Structure adapts while relationships persist. The landscape records this adaptation quietly. Form becomes the memory. Across centuries, these records accumulate. Yellowstone becomes a map of what has worked. That map remains legible because processes repeat. Learning is built into the system. Nothing needs to be instructed. Constraint provides guidance. Seen across the full extent of the park, Yellowstone gathers many systems into one landscape without forcing them into uniform behavior. Volcanic heat, surface water, living soil, and mobile animals remain linked while operating on different clocks. Deep heat continues rising from fractured rock, whether the surface is frozen or green. That energy feeds geysers, warms groundwater, and alters chemistry long before it becomes visible. Geothermal basins keep this deep connection present at the surface. Steam, mineral terraces, and warm runoff express underground adjustment rather than sudden change. Water connects nearly every part of the landscape. Snow stores it patiently, melt releases it gradually, and rivers carry its influence outward. These movements spread energy and matter across space while smoothing them through time. Short-term variation fades as signals integrate downstream. Rivers act as long memory channels rather than drains. Their bends, floodplains, and terraces reflect centuries of repeated flow. Change is written into geometry. The river records persistence rather than events. Lakes extend this memory further. Large volumes store heat and nutrients long enough to mute seasonal extremes. Yellowstone Lake gathers signals slowly. Biological timing responds to average conditions rather than daily fluctuation. Forests record time through structure. Rings, canopy density, and age distribution preserve the outcome of repeated seasons. Grasslands carry memory differently. Soil depth and root systems store the effects of grazing, moisture, and fire. Geothermal areas remind the surface that Yellowstone is still connected to deep earth processes. Mineral deposition records adjustment, happening continuously rather than episodically. Microbial life anchors these processes at the smallest scale. Chemistry shifts first, shaping what larger life can sustain. Animals integrate all of this through movement. Routes persist because they reduce energy cost across time. Paths remain until repeated use no longer pays. Abandonment happens quietly. Large grazers shape vegetation through repetition rather than force. Open ground persists where efficiency remains high. Predators reshape that movement by altering where and when grazing occurs. Redistribution replaces removal. Disturbance reorganizes structure rather than erasing it. Fire, flood, and cold rebuild patterns based on what follows. Recovery assembles new arrangements that still carry traces of what came before. Return is not required for continuity, because change passes through ordered handoffs. Yellowstone avoids abrupt swings. Chemistry shifts before plants respond, and plants respond before populations adjust. This sequencing filters out false signals. Only persistent conditions drive lasting change. Time therefore becomes the organizing force. Effects arrive when alignment persists, not when change first appears. This delay creates stability without rigidity. The system remains responsive without rushing. Across decades, limits narrow quietly. Energy cost rises before failure becomes possible. Selective retreat replaces collapse. What no longer works fades without drama. Across centuries, structure records what repetition has tested and retained. The landscape becomes a physical memory. What persists is not balance at a moment, but continuity across time. Adjustment is sufficient. Nothing here needs to finish to be complete. Processes overlap and continue. Yellowstone endures by remaining responsive rather than fixed. Change continues quietly, guided by connection. Seen this way, Yellowstone persists as a living system shaped by repetition, where energy moves, structure adapts, and continuity carries on. This pattern becomes clearer when the same conditions repeat over many seasons. As these patterns repeat, Yellowstone begins to express time through resistance rather than reaction. Change meets friction in soils, channels, and living structure that have been shaped by what came before. This friction is not opposition. It is the accumulated result of repeated alignment that slows response until conditions persist long enough to matter. Landscape inertia emerges most clearly where water movement meets terrain. Valleys, basins, and plateaus channel flow in ways that remain stable even as climate varies. Because elevation and slope change slowly, they anchor hydrology across generations. Snow accumulates in the same places, melt follows similar routes, and rivers retain recognizable courses. These anchors allow learning to persist. Animals inherit usable pathways because the ground beneath them does not reorganize quickly. Rivers demonstrate this persistence through channel memory. Even after floods, flow returns to familiar corridors shaped by earlier events. Sediment movement reinforces this behavior. Material eroded upstream settles predictably where velocity drops, rebuilding features that were previously worn down. This rebuilding prevents rivers from wandering endlessly. Movement stays bounded by accumulated structure. Floodplains therefore act as buffers rather than scars. Repeated flooding distributes energy laterally instead of forcing it downstream. Vegetation reinforces this buffering. Roots stabilize banks, while flexible stems bend rather than break. Where this reinforcement persists, erosion slows. Channel change becomes incremental instead of abrupt. Lakes extend this inertia vertically. Depth resists temperature change, storing heat and releasing it slowly. Because of this resistance, biological timing in lakes follows averages rather than extremes. Organisms respond to trends rather than anomalies. Soils provide another layer of resistance. Organic matter, once built, slows water loss and temperature fluctuation. This moderation allows life to continue operating beneath snow and through dry periods. Activity reduces, but does not stop. The longer a soil profile persists, the more influence it exerts. Deep soils remember moisture regimes that shallow soils cannot. Vegetation adapts to this memory. Species composition reflects long-term reliability rather than recent abundance. Forests express this most clearly. Tree establishment succeeds only when multiple favorable years align. Single good years do little. Structure responds to sequences. Fire interacts with this inertia in predictable ways. Burning removes surface structure, but leaves deeper organization intact. Recovery depends on what remains underneath. Soil, seed banks, and root systems determine outcome more than flame behavior. Repeated fire intervals tune the system. Too frequent and recovery stalls, too infrequent and density increases vulnerability. This tuning does not seek balance. It narrows viable states. Aspen groves demonstrate narrowing clearly. Root systems persist, but structural options decline when browsing and moisture stress repeat. The grove survives fewer configurations over time. Persistence becomes constrained. Grasslands experience similar narrowing. Productive states persist only where grazing, fire, and moisture align repeatedly. When alignment fails, grasslands do not vanish. They harden into lower return systems that quietly lose use. Animals respond before collapse occurs. Movement shifts away from declining efficiency. This response redistributes pressure across space. Use declines without depletion. Predators inherit these shifts. Vulnerability concentrates where retreat has already occurred. The appearance of sudden predation often masks long preparation. Conditions were set earlier through repeated stress. Small mammals experience these processes at finer scale. Burrow networks reflect snow depth and soil firmness accumulated over winters. Tunnel systems persist where insulation remains reliable. Exposure increases where repetition breaks that reliability. Information flow becomes limiting under these conditions. Sound and scent transmission determine access more than abundance. Owls respond by abandoning acoustically unsuitable meadows. Prey remains present but inaccessible. This selectivity conserves energy. Efficiency replaces persistence. Microbial communities mirror this behavior chemically. Activity concentrates where conditions remain reliable. Repeated moisture and temperature patterns stabilize enzyme function. Chemical throughput becomes predictable. Plants respond only after this stability persists. Growth follows chemistry, not weather. This layering explains why ecosystems appear slow to respond. Signals must pass through multiple filters. Each filter reduces noise. Only sustained change reaches the surface. The result is coherence without rigidity. Yellowstone remains adaptable without being volatile. Across decades, these filters define character. The landscape becomes legible through persistence. Across centuries, they define identity. What remains is what has endured repeated testing. This endurance does not imply permanence. It reflects ongoing adjustment constrained by memory. Time therefore acts less like a line and more like a field. Effects spread, overlap, and accumulate. Nothing here moves alone. Change passes through many hands before becoming visible. As time extends further, Yellowstone begins to reveal how scale itself governs behavior. Processes that feel dramatic at human pace become subtle when viewed across decades. Geothermal heat provides a constant reference point in this scaling. It rises steadily whether winters are harsh or mild, anchoring activity to deep conditions rather than surface variation. Because this heat supply persists, surface expression adjusts rather than disappears. Geysers quiet, springs migrate, and runoff paths shift without ending circulation. Mineral deposition records these adjustments. Silica and carbonate layers accumulate slowly, narrowing some routes while opening others. This accumulation behaves like gradual reinforcement rather than blockage. Flow reorganizes to maintain movement. Water carries this history outward. Warm runoff enters streams, influencing ice formation, chemistry, and biological timing downstream. Even when diluted, persistent inputs leave signatures. Temperature baselines shift subtly, changing how long water remains ice-free. These shifts affect sediment transport. Freeze and thaw cycles alter bank stability and channel texture over repeated winters. Over time, riverbeds smooth or roughen in response. Aquatic habitat changes before population structure does. Fish integrate these conditions through survival rather than abundance. Recruitment succeeds only when flow, temperature, and substrate align repeatedly. Misalignment leaves no immediate trace. Absence accumulates quietly. Lakes magnify this effect through storage. Large volumes integrate inputs until patterns outweigh anomalies. Circulation redistributes energy vertically and horizontally. Biological response follows averages rather than extremes. Because of this integration, lakes stabilize surrounding systems. Shoreline vegetation, insect emergence, and predator use respond to moderated conditions. Soils surrounding lakes reflect this moderation. Moisture persists longer, buffering drought effects. Vegetation responds with deeper rooting and extended productivity. Reliability becomes the defining advantage. Elsewhere, soils remain thin and fast-draining. Here, repetition determines which species persist. Volcanic substrates favor plants tolerant of fluctuation. Growth remains conservative rather than expansive. Fire overlays this foundation. Burning removes above-ground structure, but leaves mineral context intact. Recovery follows the same pathways repeatedly. Where conditions support rebuilding, structure returns. Where conditions do not, openness persists. The outcome reflects repetition, not failure. Animals respond to this predictability. Seasonal use concentrates where outcomes remain reliable. Movement patterns sharpen over time. Inefficient routes are abandoned. This abandonment shapes landscape use. Some areas become quieter without being damaged. Predators track this redistribution. Hunting success aligns with concentrated movement. The appearance of control masks dependence. Predators follow prey, shaped by earlier conditions. Learning binds these responses together. Memory reduces error across generations. Paths persist because they have worked repeatedly. Novelty carries higher cost. Small-scale organisms follow the same rule. Microbial communities stabilize where chemistry remains consistent. Enzymatic pathways adapt to persistent ranges. Throughput becomes predictable. Plants depend on this predictability. Nutrient uptake stabilizes only after chemical conditions persist. Growth, therefore, lags behind environmental change. The delay filters instability. This filtering produces resilience. Yellowstone absorbs variation without amplification. Across decades, this resilience shapes composition. Species that tolerate delay persist. Species requiring immediacy fade. Selection favors patience. Across centuries, these preferences define character. The system becomes tuned to persistence. Disturbance does not reset this tuning. It interacts with it. Fire, flood, and cold test existing structure. Outcomes depend on what endures beneath. Recovery assembles around remaining scaffolds. New arrangements inherit old constraints. This inheritance explains continuity. Change builds on memory rather than erasing it. Time therefore functions as storage. Structure holds experience. Energy moves through this stored framework. Flow follows form. Form reflects repetition. Repetition reflects survival. Nothing here seeks completion. Processes remain open. The landscape continues adjusting. Motion persists without urgency. As these layers of adjustment accumulate, Yellowstone begins to show how continuity can emerge without stability in any single state. The system persists because relationships remain intact, even as participants change. Geology provides the longest memory. Rock composition, fracture patterns, and elevation set constraints that outlast climate cycles and biological turnover. These constraints guide water movement repeatedly. Snow falls, melts, infiltrates, and resurfaces along routes shaped long before present conditions. Because those routes persist, water availability remains patterned rather than random. Reliability emerges from form rather than forecast. Living systems adapt to this reliability. Plants establish where moisture can be trusted across years, not where it is briefly abundant. Root depth, growth timing, and lifespan reflect this trust. Structure becomes conservative in exchange for persistence. Forests demonstrate this clearly through slow turnover. Individual trees fall, but canopy patterns endure. Where fire resets structure, recovery follows familiar pathways. Seed sources, soils, and microclimates determine outcome more than the event itself. Grasslands exhibit the same logic through openness. Where grazing, fire, and moisture align repeatedly, grass persists. Where alignment weakens, shrubs encroach slowly. The shift happens quietly, without abrupt boundary. Animals track these structural cues. Movement concentrates where outcomes remain predictable. Seasonal ranges shrink or expand based on accumulated experience. Memory replaces exploration. Large grazers reduce use before forage collapses. Energy cost shapes behavior earlier than scarcity. This early response protects the system. Pressure lifts without exhaustion. Predators inherit this redistribution. Hunting success aligns with narrowed movement. Their influence reinforces pattern rather than disrupting it. Redistribution replaces removal. Small mammals follow similar rules at finer scale. Burrows persist where insulation and access remain reliable. Snow structure becomes decisive. Repeated freeze and thaw patterns define usable habitat. Information flow governs access. Sound, scent, and vibration determine success. Owls abandon acoustically unreliable meadows. Prey remains present, but functionally unreachable. This functional loss precedes population decline. The signal arrives early. Microbial communities echo this pattern chemically. Activity persists where moisture and temperature remain within familiar ranges. Enzyme systems stabilize under repetition. Chemistry becomes predictable. Plants respond to this predictability. Nutrient uptake and growth align only after conditions persist. This sequence explains why visible change lags. Multiple filters delay response. Each filter reduces volatility. Stability emerges from patience. Across decades, these filters shape composition. Systems favor endurance over speed. Across centuries, they shape identity. Yellowstone becomes recognizable through persistence. This recognizability does not imply stasis. Change continues within bounds. Bounds are set by memory. What has worked remains possible. Disturbance tests those bounds. Outcomes depend on remaining structure. Fire removes, but also reveals. What persists beneath determines what returns. Flood redistributes without erasing. Channels reform along familiar paths. Cold constrains without stopping. Activity shifts rather than ceases. These responses share a common feature. They depend on sequence rather than moment. Single events matter less than patterns. Repetition gives meaning. Time therefore acts as the organizing medium. It connects cause to effect across delay. Because of delay, Yellowstone appears calm, even while adjusting. Motion spreads thinly across many pathways. No single pathway carries the whole burden. Responsibility is shared. This sharing prevents collapse. Pressure dissipates. Recovery follows the same logic. Expansion waits for confirmation. Confirmation requires alignment across systems. Water, chemistry, structure, and movement must agree. When agreement persists, change proceeds smoothly. Growth follows support. When agreement fails, restraint remains. Use declines without damage. This restraint preserves options. The system avoids overcommitment. Across the park, this behavior repeats. Basins, forests, rivers and plateaus follow the same logic. Differences arise from context rather than rule. Timing and structure determine outcome. Geothermal areas highlight this continuity. Heat persists regardless of season. Surface expression adjusts to maintain flow. Activity migrates without ending. Water carries this persistence outward. Rivers inherit geothermal influence gradually. Downstream systems integrate the signal. Extremes soften with distance. Lakes store and redistribute energy. Biological timing stabilizes. Soils surrounding water deepen. Vegetation responds with reliability. Animals adjust routes accordingly. Use concentrates where return remains steady. This integration links the park as a whole. No area functions alone. Energy moves from depth to surface to distance. Each handoff preserves continuity. Seen at this scale, Yellowstone becomes less a place of events and more a place of processes. What matters is not what happens, but what keeps happening. Repetition shapes expectation. Expectation shapes structure. Structure guides movement. Movement redistributes energy. Energy flow maintains life. Life adapts to constraint. Constraint defines possibility. Possibility narrows without closing. Across centuries, this pattern holds. Yellowstone remains coherent because it remembers. That memory is not stored in one place. It is distributed across rock, water, soil, and living systems. Together, these elements maintain continuity without requiring balance. Adjustment replaces equilibrium. Nothing here resolves fully. Processes overlap and continue. The system does not hurry. It waits. Waiting filters noise. Persistence selects outcome. Seen this way, Yellowstone is vast not only in space, but in duration. Its character emerges from time allowed to work. Change continues quietly through connection. Continuity carries on. Across longer spans, climate variability shapes Yellowstone more through persistence than intensity. A sequence of slightly warmer summers or marginally drier winters matters more than any extreme year in isolation. These gradual shifts influence snowpack depth, melt timing, and soil recharge subtly at first. The strongest consequences appear later, when vegetation and hydrology have already adjusted. Temperature trends alter the length of effective growing seasons. Even small extensions or contractions change how much energy plants can store before dormancy. Stored energy determines resilience. Plants with insufficient reserves enter winter at a disadvantage that may not be visible until the following year. Repeated warm periods can increase evapotranspiration without increasing precipitation. Soils dry earlier, and late summer moisture becomes less reliable. This unreliability reshapes root architecture over time. Shallow systems become more common as deep moisture retreats. Vegetation composition responds to this change. Species tolerant of fluctuation replace those requiring steady access. Forests register these trends slowly. Growth rings narrow or widen in response to repeated constraint rather than single seasons. Tree establishment becomes episodic. Recruitment succeeds only when favorable conditions align across several consecutive years. When alignment fails repeatedly, forests thin without dramatic loss. Canopy gaps increase gradually. These gaps alter snow accumulation patterns. Wind scours expose ground, while drifts deepen elsewhere. Snow redistribution feeds back into soil moisture. Melt infiltrates unevenly, reinforcing patchiness. Patchiness becomes structure. The landscape differentiates into zones of persistence and retreat. Grasslands experience similar differentiation. Productivity remains high where moisture reliability persists. Where it does not, forage quality declines first. Animals adjust use before biomass disappears. This early adjustment prevents overuse. Decline proceeds without depletion. Rivers integrate climate trends through flow regime. Base flow responds to groundwater recharge accumulated over years. Lower recharge reduces late-season flow reliability. Channels narrow functionally before geometry changes. Aquatic habitat contracts quietly. Side channels dry more frequently. Fish respond through survival rather than abundance. Recruitment declines before adult numbers fall. Population change lags behind habitat change. The delay masks cause. Flood frequency also shifts with climate patterns. Altered timing affects sediment transport. Sediment distribution reshapes spawning substrates. Suitability changes without obvious disturbance. Lakes buffer these trends but do not eliminate them. Thermal stratification responds to persistent warming. Longer stratified periods limit oxygen mixing at depth. Biological stress increases gradually. Plankton communities adjust composition. Food availability shifts before predators respond. Bird populations reflect this delay. Breeding success changes before numbers decline. Migration timing also adjusts. Arrival and departure align with averaged conditions. Mismatch becomes costly. Energy expenditure rises when timing slips. Animals respond by narrowing movement windows. Activity concentrates where return remains predictable. Predictability replaces abundance as the primary driver. Reliability matters more than peak productivity. Population inertia slows response. Long-lived species adjust slowly to changing conditions. This inertia provides stability. It also delays recovery. Recovery requires sustained improvement. One favorable year rarely reverses trend. Repeated favorable conditions rebuild resilience gradually. Structure responds last.